when I saw that I was the last slot on a Friday afternoon, I changed my focus slightly. I was going to show a bit of a technical overview of Solibri and a bit of a demo, but I thought I'll condense that down and try and do something a bit more interactive, hopefully, and more informative, and try and get some thoughts going. And what I've done instead is we've actually organised a follow-up webinar of Solibri, so if anyone wants to see a demo or an overview from after today, then I'll put the details on the screen, and it's gone out on our social media as well. So off the top of my head, it's 21st of November, so an afternoon session. But yeah, please register onto that if you'd like to see it. So to get started, I just wanted to load up, if we can put that on the screen. Just want to, if everyone's got their phones here, and if you've got an internet connection and can quickly log on to this web link, it's just I've been floating around a few events recently, and I've been trying to do some polls to see what people are doing and where we may be able to help, and try and get people thinking about the processes that they have. So if you can, I can see a few people have got their phones out, so if you can log on to this pollev.com/harryo897 and vote. The question on there, as you can see, is do you currently run a quality assurance or quality checking process in-house? If that doesn't apply to you, then maybe some of your customers or the supply chain that you work with, if they have a process like this in-house as well, maybe you could answer on their behalf. And I'll explain and go into a bit more detail as to why this is relevant in a couple of slides' time. It's an O. Harry O for O'Neill. Good Irish surname. Is it working? Is everyone able to find it? There we go. Thought I was having live demo troubles then. We got there. And what we're going to do as well is I'm going to share this out on social media as well, and just some of the results. As I say, it's interesting, and the results that are on screen as well are really good to see, actually. They're completely different, as you'll see in a couple of slides' time, to what I've seen recently. So this is really great. Can I also, while we're doing that as well, I don't want to be too interactive and wacky, but can I see a show of hands just if everyone just had heard of Solibri before this event? Great. There we are. It's working. Right. I think if that's okay, if we can go back on. So, just to give a bit of an introduction to Solibri, as I say, I'm going to keep it very top level and leave the technical stuff for the webinar. But we are part of the Nemetschek group, so we have a few, as you can see at the bottom of this slide, we have a few sister companies that work alongside us. Nemetschek have a complete range of softwares and technologies within the group, so we're trying to look at a bit more synergy with that kind of as we go as well. I won't read out the facts and figures, but that's my corporate piece done anyway. So Solibri, for those of you that don't know, most of you will know, but we are rules-based model checking. So clash detection is thrown about, the term or the phrase clash detection is thrown about quite a lot with people that I meet with and talk to. We're trying to go, and we do go a step further with actually looking at, with the rules, we're looking at data and some of the more detailed stuff that we can look at on projects and with the models that we're creating. And I said that I'd run a couple of these polls recently, and I will go on to these results because they are interesting. So with one of our sister companies, I won't say who they were, but it was quite architecturally heavy in the audience. There was about 300 people in the audience a few weeks ago. And I ran the same question and another one. And do you currently run the QA/QC process, as I've just done here? And I also asked, what is quality assurance to you? Because it's an interesting one, and this is one that, and I'm going to put one up a bit later on as well, another poll question, but this one was, people are able to type, they don't vote, they can type what quality assurance is to them. And some of the results were quite interesting. So we have a look. So this, do you currently run a QA/QC process? This was the results we saw before. So I was, surprised, but at the same time, with some of the conversations we have, not so surprised. But this allowed us to have quite a good conversation around the importance of model checking and having better quality models going through. But as we saw from your answers, it was kind of the reverse of that, which is great. Then the next question, what is quality assurance to you? And there's some good answers in this as well. Good as in funny. So I should explain, the bigger the word and the more central it is, the more it was typed and voted for. So you can see coordination is kind of the main one that was in there. And we talk about coordination a lot. And it's really important, on projects, trying to make sure everyone's models work together in a workflow, and to make sure that there's no, we're not going to get on site and see clashes later on. So we're doing that at earlier stages. Somebody managed to put dunno. I don't know if that was a joke or if someone genuinely didn't know what quality assurance was to them. But we see things like, obviously coordination, we've got compliance, so looking at maybe building regulations and some of the checks against standards in there. Steve, I don't know who Steve is, but he's quite important to quality assurance, to that person apparently. But yeah, just quite an interesting one to see what people were typing there. So why do we ask all of these questions? And really, is it enough to only do clash detection? For some people, yes. If in some disciplines it's fine, you just do some basic physical clashes. But for us, we're trying to talk more about now data and looking at how things are tagged and whether we're compliant with build project specifications and building regs and things like that. And is your model fit for the purpose that it's actually being created for? So a very quick few slides. What does Solibri Model Checker actually do? And I'll just explain the workflow as well that we adopt. So we can import, first of all, maybe an architectural model. We've also then got, that would then, forgetting my own slides. That then becomes a Solibri model. So then we can federate together a structural model into that one as well. We can then bring in some HVAC and an electrical model. And that all becomes one federated Solibri model, one federated IFC. We can then run some visual checks and we can fly around the model. If any of you have seen the Solibri interface, it's quite nice to be able to flow around, do section views, box views, walkthroughs, plug an Xbox controller or something into it and have a walkthrough in a VR headset if you want to. This is when the checking side comes in and the rules that we can actually put in. So we can look at integrity of data. We can do some coordination and classification checks within there. We've got checking and compliance, so the compliance checks with, as I mentioned before, building regs and that side, and version control, so we can run revision comparisons to see how things have changed since the last time that we saw a model and we've fed back out some clash results. And we can identify real and potential issues, so rather than things that are already there, we can start to identify and run checks to see how the model's been created and whether there's going to be some issues further down the line. We can then communicate that back via BCF. Is everyone familiar with BCF in the room? Is there a show of hands of anyone that's not? Not. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, and there's probably some better explanations in the room to be fair, but to me I like to call it like the IFC for checking results. So it's an open format that we can report out clashes that we find or issues within the model. We can send that back to the authoring tool, and that file can be opened directly in the authoring tool, and you'll see the clash with comments that have been created. You make your changes, comment back, and send back an updated BCF file. So it's just a way of kind of streamlining that workflow, I guess, and feeding directly into issue tracking tools as well, rather than trawling through a spreadsheet and trying to manually find where these clashes are. From there then, once we've repeated that cycle and we have a clean model, we can then do information takeoffs in Solibri. We've got reliable quantity information there, or quality information, and then we can output COBE from there as well. So just some examples then, and this isn't everything, this is just kind of a snapshot. So we can look at accessibility within Solibri. So this is a good example. It's one that people talk about so much at the moment, and it's the conversation I have most frequently, is Part M building regulations in the UK. Can we look at accessibility guidelines and try and configure some rules around that? And it's the sort of stuff that we're trying to get some user groups built up for as well, to get people contributing and looking at the rules that we can create. Accessibility continues, so we can look at, this is a zoom in on like a turning circle of a wheelchair within a WC. So looking at spatial checks and whether things are going to work for us. We can then run architectural versus structural. This might be structural and MEP, it might be all of them together as we saw in the workflow, but again, just a quick example. We can look at egress analysis and occupancy within the building, so we can look at, from any point in the building, are we within specification or within the guidelines of the nearest fire exit to us? And can we see Solibri mapping out that route to make sure that we are compliant with that? And then finally, we can look at information and data tags, so uniclass tagging within the model, and looking at how we name things within our practice and whether we are sticking to our way of naming things as we go on to future projects. So I have a good customer, which is they're in a case study as well, that they're referring back to a database or a CSV file, if you like, of previous naming schemes from projects, loading that into Solibri and checking the current model that's loaded in to make sure that is named in the same way so it's consistent across projects. And then we've got the ITO, as we mentioned before, the information takeoff, and we've got the COBie resources as well. So rules to run on the model to make sure everything COBie related within the model is correct or present. So who do we help? And what's in it for you specifically? It's quite an ambiguous question, and it's going to lead me on to another very, very quick poll question, I promise. So these are kind of all of the varieties of customers that we have. And really I wanted to leave that to open up and lead just into the next poll question, if we can do that. So sorry, I'm going to make you grab your phones out again. And this is going to be the same as the one that I said we had before, that I did at the sister company event. So when you log onto the page this time, it'll ask you to type your answer. So who is responsible for model checking on a project, in your opinion? And we had some interesting answers to this one before as well. Everyone. I like that. The model owner. I like that everyone's getting bigger. That's great. We've got manager. That might be information manager. I don't know. No, that's interesting. Architects, authors. We haven't. Oh, we've had Steve. Oh, that's made my day that Steve's made a return. Someone's following me on my roadshow of presentations. Cool, thank you for that. And I can share a snapshot of that out on social media as well, and through the guys at CitA that can go online. Perfect, if we can switch back again. So I'll whiz past that. So I just wanted to touch very briefly, we've been working quite hard recently on trying to get some case studies built, because it's difficult to prove the difference that we're trying to make and are making within some of our customers without having stories that we can share. So these are just two that I picked from recent projects that we've done. So Unibail Rodamco Westfield, it used to be Westfield Europe. So they run own and build and design the big shopping centres in London. So they are a really interesting one for use of Solibri. So they're very data focused, and they're one of these customers that I was talking about, referring back to previous project naming schemes and things like that as well. And AWW inspired environments as well. Architectural customer in Bristol of ours, great practice. and again, making some real good uses of Solibri. So I'm going to circulate those out as well and make them available. So if anyone wants to download those and can't find them, my details will be shared as well. So if you want to get in touch, I can share those with you. And lastly, I said I would mention it or just show it. So we've got the winter webinar. It's a webinar. Coming up on the 21st of November, 3 o'clock. So the links have gone out on Twitter and LinkedIn, on my personal one as well. I should have put that on there. If not, then we can circulate them out again, or just get in touch and we can get you onto that. And we've also got our User Excellence event. It's our annual Solibri event coming up on the 27th of November. It is in London, so I appreciate if you can't make it. But again, the content and slides from that will be shared. And that was me.
Stay with us for a second?
Yep.
Okay. Any questions for our speaker, Harry? Yes. Maybe one quick question. There's been a bit of bad publicity in Ireland at the moment about schools and poor workmanship, and schools have to be closed down and such like. I mean, would your product pick up any structural problems?
Yeah, I guess it comes down to earlier stage checking, doesn't it? Really, it's making sure that those checks are done in the earlier stages.
What type of checks? Would you give an example of something structural?
Structural wise, I mean, we don't go into the kind of FEA, element analysis side of things, but certainly we go. You can look at how the structural model is built and how that's going to work with, as we've seen before, federated model on the architectural model, and see how they work together and make sure there's not going to be any issues further down the line. If that makes sense.
Any questions from the audience? Shane has a question.
Yeah, Shane Brody, Women Scan today. And as to what's installed versus what was in the model, I have the answer for that one for you, Alan, as you know. My question is about the geometry. What geometry checking are you doing within Solibri? So how do you know if you've got good geometry or bad geometry in the IFC or whatever format comes into you?
Can you give an example of something you might be thinking of for that?
So sometimes IFC serializes out, say, particularly from certain products, Revit, the IFC serialization isn't perfect, and there's problems then with the geometry when you go to calculate it because it's not capped, the edges aren't properly shared, they're going straight through models, so you then go into 3ds Max or something like that to fix them. So do you check geometry for so that other machines can read the actual IFC for geometry and for shape calculations?
We do, yeah. It comes down to, again, because we work off of this rules engine, it comes down to the way that the rules are configured and exactly what you might want to be checking for. But it also, we can look maybe more at the way that the IFC is created and exported and how Solibri would find that. I'm kind of glossing a little bit, I think. But I'm happy to talk maybe about some more specific cases again and see, but that's definitely, we've got customers doing geometry checks, but specific cases aren't flowing into it at the moment.
Okay, so unless there's one final question, we are committed to finish at 4:30.
I was just wondering, in
precisely 4:30.
In the UK, is there any centralized work around building regulations? So I mean, are there, maybe Alexander, you might want to contribute to this as well, is there any effort being put into looking at how, as an industry, rather than individual companies model checking, but how would local authorities or central government check building code and various other things?
It's something, as I said before, it's the most frequent conversation that I have is around building regs and stuff that we can package to say, right, this will check to make sure your model is compliant with Part M. So it's something that we as a company with our customers are trying to put together user groups to come up with these, as I say, bundles and packages of rules that we can then say, right, this is great to check your model against this specific area. It comes down to previously people have been quite, I'm not going to name any names, no specific springs to mind anyway, but it comes down to people being protective over the stuff that they're creating, so not wanting to share that. But we're now seeing a lot more people become open to sharing because there's things that they now want as well that other people are doing. So it's something I'm trying to lead. It's trying to get these groups of people set up that we can start to do those bundles and packages to check against building, so we can make it easier for people to then just take on Solibri and run those checks.
Thank you, Harry.
Right.
Okay, thank you. There's
Thank
one
you.
more question, is it from No? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.